my bet is Jim was there as one of the main guys that was there. And that was the first UN conference on the environment. And a lot of the issues that we're still involved with, save the whales and population growth and toxic pollution, they were all there. Greenpeace was there. I hope all of you know that Greenpeace is a Made in Canada organization that sprang up in Vancouver to protest the American plans to test nuclear weapons in Amchitka. Of course, Americans were no different then than they are now. They didn't give a shit what Canadians said. They blew them up anyway. But thank goodness Greenpeace was one of the byproducts of that event. In 1973, we have the OPEC oil embargo. And that was really a very frightening event. I mean, suddenly oil prices skyrocketed and there were shortages, and you remember lineups at the pumps and people were shooting each other, and it was a very frightening thing. And the Science Council of Canada, which existed at that time, was asked to look at what we do about a resource like oil. Ursula Franklin was an eminent scientist, was asked to head a committee to look at this issue, and in 1977, the Franklin Report came out, Canada as a Conserver Society. And I hope you all know that what she said is that we should be using our resources as conservatively and efficiently as possible, and strongly recommended that Canada enter into renewable energy, the sector, and that we had the potential to become world leaders in the whole area of renewable energy. 1977. Of course, Canada did what Canada tends to do with studies like this. They said, thank you, Dr. Franklin, put it on the shelf and promptly forgot it, but Denmark and Germany didn't. And of course, today, Denmark and Germany are leading exporters of wind power around the world. In Germany, it's created over 200,000 jobs, the fastest growing job sector in Germany. The United Nations appointed the Prime Minister of Norway, Gro Harlem Brundtland, to head a commission to look at what we do about the environment. And in 1987, the Brundtland Report came out as Our Common Future, and Jim McNeill definitely was in that, right, left, and center. And that's the book that coined the expression sustainable development. The cynics said that the environmentalists got sustainable and the business sector got the development. But it was a powerful phrase that we continue to use today. And that Brundtland Commission report called for protection of 12% of the land base of the planet for other species, which I found absolutely astonishing, that one species, us, out of maybe 30,000 species on the planet, 30 million species on the planet, felt that we had the right to exploit 88% of the earth and leave 12% for all the other species. That's in large part our failure to even achieve the 12% protection is reflected in the extinction crisis that we now face. In 1988, I remember it vividly because it was the first time I got to go to Australia, which I'd always dreamt of as a boy to visit. The Australian government had established an organization called the Commission for the Future to look at the future of Australia in terms of its science and technology. And when I visited then, of course I knew about global warming, but at that time I just thought it was something way in the future. I was much more concerned about clear-cut logging and toxic pollution. But the scientists at the Commission for the Future showed me the work and absolutely frightened me, and I realized at that point we had to act on global warming. In 1988, Margaret Thatcher was shown on television in England, picking up litter in London and turning to camera saying, well, I'm a greenie too. In 1988, a guy ran for president of the United States and said, if you vote for me, I promise I will be an environmental president. His name was George H.W. Bush. There wasn't a green bone in his body, but he said it because the public in the United States demanded it of him. Well, of course, when he was elected, he quickly showed how shallow campaign promises are. He quickly became the worst environmental president the United States had ever had, and he stayed that way until his son was elected, and then, of course, he became the second worst environmental president the United States had ever had. In 1988, Brian Mulroney was reelected, and he suddenly got religion about the environment, and to show his commitment, he appointed the brightest star in his cabinet to be the Minister of the Environment. That was Lucien Bouchard. I interviewed Lucien Bouchard 2 months after he was in that position, and I said, what do you feel is the most critical issue confronting Canadians? And his answer immediately was global warming. That was impressive. So I said, how serious is it? And these are his exact words. It threatens the survival of our species. We have to act now. 1988, the Minister of the Environment. 1988, there was a major conference of atmosphere scientists in Toronto. It was led by the eminent climatologist Ken Hare. And Stephen Lewis told me that Brian Mulroney asked him to chair a couple of the sessions at that conference. 300 scientists. At the end of the conference, they were so convinced the science was in that they issued a press release that said global warming represents a threat second only to nuclear war, and called for a 20% reduction in the greenhouse gas emissions below 1988 levels by the year 2005. Think if we had taken it seriously. Public had registered the environment at the top of the issue. Politicians had got the message. The Environment Minister said it threatens the survival of our species. The scientists said the science is in, and called for a 20% reduction. Think if we had done it. We would be so far past the Kyoto target and well on our way to the deep reductions that are needed. But we didn't do it. We didn't do it for a number of reasons. Well, let me leave that for now, why we didn't do it. In 1988, I interviewed 150 scientists around the world and experts for a program called It's a Matter of Survival on CBC Radio. And I did that over a period of 6 months, and having all of that expertise telescoped into a 6-month period, I suddenly saw with absolute clarity that the planet was falling, or at least the biosphere was falling under the most powerful predator on the planet. I could see that we were undermining the life support systems of the planet. And we did the 5-part series, It's a Matter of Survival, which for me is the best thing I've ever done in the media. And it got an absolutely unprecedented response. 16,000 Canadians wrote in. And the vast majority of them said, I heard your program, you scared the hell out of me, but what do we do? And because of the question, what do we do? My wife said, look, you can't go on warning that the sky is falling. You've got to really start giving them some options. And a year later, we set up the David Suzuki Foundation. In 1989, The Nature of Things did the first special on global warming. And I remember vividly writing in the script, this is an issue we have to confront immediately and act on. But it's a slow motion catastrophe. I really believed in 1989 that it wouldn't kick in for many, many decades, maybe 80, 90 years away. So we had time. What's been astonishing to me is that even with a 0.7 degree rise, nature is showing enormous changes from that small temperature rise. In 1990, the World Watch Institute in the United States declared the 1990s had to be the turnaround decade. This 10-year period, we had to shift and begin to go in a different direction. And that's when we started the David Suzuki Foundation, and we said, we can't fool around. We've got 10 years. I really thought we were only going to exist for 10 years. We said every dollar we get in through the door, we're going to send out through the door. We're going to spend every cent we get, because we only have a 10-year window. And now, of course, it's 18 years later, and we're still struggling along. But at that time, there was that sense of real urgency that time was limited, and we had to get on with finding solutions. In 1992, we had the largest gathering ever of heads of state in human history at the Earth Summit in Rio. And Rio was meant to signal